Hello, my name is Mary Bell. 8 years ago, I was at a crossroads. I could either continue to listen to my doctors and become increasingly more ill, or quietly take matters into my own hands in hopes of a better outcome. At this point, I was completely incapacitated with a laundry list of diagnoses that included narcolepsy with cataplexy, Hashimoto's, anxiety, depression, cluster B personality disorders, hypertension, morbid obesity, fatty liver disease, and stage 1 kidney disease, and age-related cognitive decline and asthma. My list of medications included Prozac, Wellbutrin, Buspar, Tramadol, Xanax, Ritalin, albuterol inhaler, HCTZ, spironolactone, Singulair, levothyroxine, and I was also on antibiotics and prednisone for several times a year for asthma flares. A chance encounter with a new sleep medicine doctor offered a glimmer of hope for reining in the overwhelming sleepiness that interfered with my life. She prescribed a medication called sodium oxybate. My first experience using this nighttime medication was nothing short of miraculous. For the first time since I could remember, I not only slept through the night, but I was able to easily awaken the next morning. This elation lasted only briefly, as I quickly realized that without this medication, I had no quality of life. What began next was a desperate search for survival that was not centered around pharmaceuticals. I was raised during the time when the seed oils and the low-fat dietary standards were touted as the new healthy way of eating. Additionally, in the 1960s and 70s, the detrimental long-term impacts of these new dietary standards on our overall health was not on anyone's radar. My story didn't really start in 2016, though. It started early in life, probably infancy. I was premature and formula fed and suffered from colic right out of the gate. As a result, I was prescribed paregoric, which was used rather frequently throughout my infancy. As a preschooler and elementary-aged child, I was very emotional and frequently had tummy aches. I have no doubt that these two symptoms were red flags pointing towards anxiety. As I moved into puberty, the anxiety worsened and deep depression settled in. My cycles, though regular, were brutal, often leaving me bedridden for a day or so every month. Soon thereafter, cystic acne developed, for which I was treated with tetracycline and retin A, and this went on for a number of years. Insomnia developed with frequent awakenings at night. Many days at school or at work, I found myself sitting in the restroom, just kind of dozing off for a few moments, then splashing cold water on me to wake up. Focus was a huge issue, and as such, I was barely a C student taking academic level coursework. Though I did not participate in extracurricular activities, I did hold a part-time job during my junior and senior year of high school. After graduating high school, I went to college. At the end of the first semester, while on Christmas break, I found myself sleeping 14 to 16 hours a day, sometimes as much as 22 hours a day if I didn't need to be anywhere. Barely able to remain awake long enough to eat, my mother often talked me through meals, where afterwards I would crawl back in my bed until the next time I needed to get up. Though my mother was concerned, my dad considered it normal college behavior. Upon returning to college, this excessive sleepiness continued. A concerned professor implored me to visit the infirmary, and there it was deduced that my symptoms were consistent with mononucleosis, from which I was recovering. Nevertheless, the overwhelming sleepiness continued well into the summer of 1983, after my freshman year. By this point, though, I'd become accustomed to the sleepiness, and I just worked around it, and no one questioned it further. I struggled academically for the next 3 years, but finally graduating with an associate's degree in health information, I began my career. At this point in life, heightened anxiety, major depression, and sleepiness ruled my life. As such, I was grumpy and miserable, but I tried to stifle it. I often came home from work and took a short nap just to get through the evening. A family physician started me on medication for anxiety and depression. It didn't help. In fact, the anxiety medication made things worse. However, with sleepiness being a known side effect of anti-anxiety meds, I was encouraged to continue taking it and was told that my body would adjust. Being well integrated into the allopathic mindset myself, I never questioned it. Meanwhile, as my job performance suffered, I found myself job hopping, and this behavior was seen as a deep, deep personality flaw on my part that I needed to correct. not as an indication of something organically wrong. Around 1988, an OBGYN who was a bit ahead of his time took a deeper look into my medical history, and he diagnosed me with premenstrual syndrome. He prescribed progesterone for a short interval and recommended switching to a diabetic diet. Surprisingly, the sugar-free diet helped tremendously. I became a much happier person all around. The depression and the anxiety, which had really been unresponsive to medication, actually lessened. I felt more positive and I had more energy. I didn't need the afternoon naps anymore, and the frequent nighttime awakenings lessened. It's during this time that I met my future husband, and I stayed with this diabetic diet for several years. In the span of 18 months, I got married, I bought a house with my new husband, lost my mother to cancer. My father moved out of state. I graduated college with my bachelor's in health sciences, and I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. By this point, I had tossed my low-carb lifestyle out the window. I was exhausted beyond belief. Barely functioning once again, my doctors assured me that this was a normal response to being a new parent. The medications were adjusted and counseling was sought. Nothing really helped. Nevertheless, the next few years were busy raising our daughter while working full-time. Meanwhile, I was struggling on many levels, including secondary infertility and a resurgence of previous difficulties with work and relationships. But I pushed through. Soon thereafter, I received a diagnosis of Hashimoto's. This was supposed to resolve everything. Energy improved slightly with the thyroid medication, and depression lessened a bit. In fact, I was finally able to become pregnant. However, I then began experiencing successive miscarriages. With no answers for the repeated miscarriages, my husband and I decided to pursue adoption, where a beautiful newborn baby boy came into our life to complete our family. Shortly after our precious little one joined our family, the sleep deprivation from caring for a newborn became overwhelming once again. And having run out of explanations for this, I was referred to sleep medicine, where in August of 2000, I received the diagnosis of narcolepsy with cataplexy. Oddly enough, this diagnosis came to a relief to me, as I felt I finally had an answer. Now with a diagnosis and treatment plan, I could get on with living a normal life, or so I thought. The next 16 years, though, were a complete blur. As the sleepiness worsened, medications were added and changed, and doses were increased. Counseling sessions were a regular occurrence to cope with life, but nothing helped. Many around me simply felt that I wasn't trying hard enough. By 2010, my marriage had completely fallen apart. In 2011, I was terminated from a job I'd been seeking for years. 2012, with my divorce final and unable to secure permanent employment, I was on public assistance. The next 4 years, I spiraled out of control, and I hit rock bottom. In 2016, things began to look up. I secured permanent employment, and with that, obtained private health insurance. With this, I sought consultation of sleep medicine, whom I had not seen since 2010. I was immediately put on a medication called sodium oxybate. This medication was a miracle. For the first time, I actually slept all night. In fact, it was the first time I realized how profound my sleep deprivation had become and how much it was interfering with my life. At this point, I petitioned my employer, claiming a disability, and received accommodations that allowed me to remain employed. However, not knowing what the future really held for me, I decided that once I had enough work credits for eligibility, I would file for permanent disability. And what followed next were a lot of realizations. I realized I had no memory of my past. I realized I was actually disabled. I realized that without this medication, I had no quality of life. With that, I realized I needed to create a backup plan in case I lost access to this medication. Searching on Facebook for groups related to narcolepsy, I ran across a group that discussed utilizing a ketogenic diet for symptom control. Admittedly, I had no idea what this was and why it worked, but I was willing to learn. In June of 2016, I officially switched to a ketogenic diet. And this is where the healing journey began. I had no idea where this journey would take me, but I wasted no time getting started, and within a month of transitioning, I could feel a big difference. I remained awake all day without needing stimulants or a nap, Short-term memory was a tad better. Focus was a tad better. And I was able to read without falling asleep. I was able to comprehend the words I was reading and actually engage in small talk with people. I realized there was something legit to this way of eating and something so powerful that could not be dismissed. Though improving in some areas, I was still struggling in others, particularly memory issues. At this point, I realized I had no long-term memory recall. For all intents and purposes, my past was a blank slate. Photographs helped, but even seeing photos did not trigger the memory recall. I was sad, knowing that I couldn't recall my past, and I had no idea how to get it back. For the next 3 years, I continued with a ketogenic lifestyle. Little by little, my health conditions improved or resolved one by one. Narcolepsy with cataplexy symptoms lessened, and the Hashimoto symptoms quieted down. But I still remained on medications, and to this day still remain on medications for those two issues. As the others resolved, I titrated off those medications. Though the cognitive decline was dismissed as irreversible and age-related, I could tell very subtle healing was happening within my mind. Gradually, my memory was improving. First to improve was short-term memory. I was less forgetful, I remembered people's names, and I engaged in more meaningful conversations. I found myself less dependent on the GPS to get me to familiar destinations, and then finally, I no longer needed it. Another pivotal moment was 3 years into my employment, when I would have qualified for long-term disability. My original plan was to reduce my hours to part-time and then begin the long, drawn-out process of qualifying. However, in 2019, I realized I no longer qualified. This was a bit of a quandary. I either needed to give up my new ketogenic lifestyle and regress backwards to become symptomatic, or keep moving forward and hope that I could support myself. Ultimately, I decided to keep the faith and move forward with a ketogenic lifestyle. Another pivotal moment in time was in 2021. Now 5 years into my journey and continuing to improve, it was at this point I switched to a meat-based lifestyle. Where I had experienced slow and steady progress with a ketogenic lifestyle, eating more meat-based brought noticeable improvements in my cognition and my energy. Old memories that I thought I'd lost forever began to resurface. I became more animated with my interactions with people, and my interests in deep, thoughtful conversation was reignited. I began relearning hobbies and walls that had been left bare since moving into the new home in 2015. I now began hanging pictures and putting family photos out and about, and I even redecorated the kitchen. It was all so strange, but yet felt so good to finally be able to express myself. Over the last 3 years, I've gone from just recalling bits and pieces of my past to remembering events in greater detail. Meanwhile, I continue to create new memories with both my children and my grandchildren. I feel certain as my brain continues to heal and reconnect neurons that more previously lost memories will continue to surface. It's been such a blessing to regain these memories and to be able to share them with my grandchildren, as well as reminisce with my children on my childhood and their childhood. What does all of this have to do with narcolepsy with cataplexy? This is a genetic disorder that evolves slowly, first with anxiety, then depression, then disrupted sleep, then overwhelming sleepiness. I do believe this disorder started very early in life and set the stage for all this happened. By using food as medicine and quantum health techniques, I've reversed my trajectory and decreased the triggers that impact all of my symptoms. Has this been an easy journey? No. Have I butted heads with dissenting opinions along the way? Absolutely. Have I consumed a high-fat diet for the last 8 years? Yes. Will I continue to eat this way forever? Very likely. Why? Because my quality of life depends on it. Having taken my first health coaching course in 2021, I wanted to know more. I needed a deeper understanding of the healing power of food and the quantum health techniques to help others discover their own healing journey. As such, I am now a certified master health coach and a human intestinal microbiome specialist. Why has it taken 8 years for me to share my story? Because I wanted to understand how and when my story started, in hopes that others who are walking a similar path might better recognize themselves in my journey. Thank you for listening.